Picture this. You are the reliable one. You're the person who shows up early, the one who stays late to finish the project, the one who organizes the family reunion. Your identity is built on a foundation of endurance. You push through. That is just what you do. And then one day, your body stops. It doesn't just pause, it quits. You get a diagnosis, adrenal insufficiency, and suddenly the biological machinery that allowed you to be the reliable one is gone. The medication keeps you alive, sure, but it doesn't give you your old self back. So, who are you now? That is the question we are wrestling with today. We are looking at a profound article from My Adrenal Life titled Identity Shifts, Grief, and Redefining Productivity After an Adrenal Insufficiency Diagnosis. And to help us unpack the psychology of this medical trauma, I'm joined by Eloise.
It's good to be here, Noah, and you hit on something vital right at the start. We tend to treat adrenal insufficiency, or AI, as a purely mechanical problem. You're missing a hormone? Here, take a pill. Replace the hormone. Problem solved. But the article and the research surrounding it argues that the diagnosis is actually a massive identity quake. It disrupts the narrative of who you think you are.
It's interesting you call it an identity quake because looking at the data, the symptoms are physical, low blood pressure, fatigue, risk of crisis. But the article emphasizes that the hardest part often isn't the symptoms themselves, it's the grief for the person you were before.
Exactly. In sociology, there's a concept coined by Michael Beery called biographical disruption. It's the idea that a chronic illness doesn't just hurt your body, it breaks the story of your life. Before the diagnosis, your story was, I am capable, I am infinite. After the diagnosis, the story becomes, I am fragile, I am limited. And for AI patients, this is particularly brutal because cortisol, the hormone they are missing, is literally the fuel for pushing through. It is the stress hormone.
Let's dig into that physiology for a second, because I think people hear stress hormone and think, oh, so you just can't handle a deadline. But according to the NIDDK, the National Institute of Diabetes and Digestive and Kidney Diseases, cortisol does a lot more than make you feel stressed.
Right. It's a complete misnomer to just call it the stress hormone in a casual sense. Physiologically, cortisol is what allows your body to maintain blood pressure and blood sugar when you are under demand. If a healthy person runs for a bus or gets the flu or has a heated argument, their adrenals pump out cortisol to mobilize glucose and keep the heart pumping strong. If you have adrenal insufficiency, that automatic response is gone. The tank is empty. So if you try to push through like you used to using willpower, you aren't just getting tired, you are risking an adrenal crisis, which is a life-threatening drop in blood pressure and consciousness. You are literally pushing your body toward shock.
So the identity of being the hard worker or the overachiever becomes biologically dangerous for them.
Precisely, and that is where the grief sets in. If your self-worth was tied to your productivity, which, let's be honest, in our culture it almost always is, you aren't just losing energy, you feel like you're losing your value as a human being.
The article touches on this idea of ambiguous loss. I know the NIH references this in their literature on chronic illness coping strategies. But usually we talk about grief when someone dies. Why is this different?
Ambiguous loss is a term developed by Dr. Pauline Boss, and it is fascinating. It usually refers to situations where someone is physically present but psychologically absent, like with dementia. But in chronic illness, it's often the reverse. You are physically here, but the you that you knew, the one who could hike 10 miles or work a 60-hour week, is gone. It is a death without a funeral. Nobody brings you a casserole because you can't work late anymore. Nobody sends a sympathy card because you have to nap at 2 p.m. But the loss is profound. You are grieving a version of yourself that is still walking around in your memories, but can no longer exist in reality.
That is heavy. And I imagine it's made worse by the fact that adrenal insufficiency is an invisible illness. If you were in a cast, people would get it, but if you just look tired, people, and maybe even you yourself, start to wonder if it's just laziness.
Oh, the internalized ableism is huge here. The article mentions the guilt for needing rest. That is a direct result of the invisibility. A study published in the National Library of Medicine on quality of life in chronic disease shows that patients who constantly compare themselves to their pre-illness self suffer significantly more distress. They are holding up a measuring stick that doesn't apply anymore. It's like judging a fish by its ability to climb a tree. You have a new physiology. You need a new measuring stick.
So what does that new measuring stick look like? Because the article talks about redefining productivity. That sounds nice on a bumper sticker, but practically speaking, we still have bills to pay and dishes to wash. How do you redefine productivity when the world demands the same output from you?
It's incredibly difficult, but it requires a shift from output-based metrics to sustainability-based metrics. The old metric was, how many tasks did I check off today? The new metric has to be, did I keep my body stable today? The article lists things like taking medication on time, resting before a crash, and canceling plans to prevent hospitalization as productive acts. And that is a radical shift. It frames self-preservation not as doing nothing, but as active medical management.
I like that framing, active medical management, because resting before you crash takes discipline. It's actually harder than pushing through sometimes. Pushing through is instinct. Stopping requires conscious control.
It requires overriding your social programming. You have to say no to people you love. You have to disappoint your boss. You have to be the person who leaves the party early. That takes immense emotional strength. That is why the article says these actions are adaptive and protective. They aren't signs of weakness. They are signs of high-level executive functioning.
I want to play devil's advocate for a moment, though. Is there a danger in this identity shift becoming a trap? If I accept that I'm a sick person now, do I stop trying? Is there a risk of becoming the diagnosis?
That is a valid fear, and it's one that keeps a lot of people in denial for too long. But the research, specifically from health psychology, suggests the opposite happens. Denial is what traps you. If you deny the condition, you keep crashing, you keep ending up in the ER, and your life actually gets smaller because you are constantly in crisis mode. Acceptance isn't resignation, it's recalibration. Once you accept the limits of the tank, you can actually drive the car more effectively. You figure out exactly how far you can go. You stop breaking down on the side of the road.
So you're saying that by acknowledging the limitation, you actually gain more agency, not less.
100%. The article talks about who you are becoming. It mentions deeper self-awareness, stronger boundaries, increased emotional intelligence. You become a person who knows exactly what they need and isn't afraid to ask for it. That is a powerful identity. It's just not the easy breezy, reliable identity you had at 25.
It reminds me of the spoon theory that's popular in chronic illness communities, though the article doesn't explicitly name it. The idea that you have a finite number of spoons or units of energy, and you have to budget them.
Exactly. And for someone with adrenal insufficiency, that budget is non-negotiable. If you run out of spoons, you don't just get cranky, you need hydrocortisone and possibly an ambulance. The stakes are biological. But I want to circle back to the anger mentioned in the text. Anger at your body, envy toward people who don't have to think about cortisol. This is part of the grief cycle that often gets skipped over because patients feel they need to be good patients.
Right, the pressure to stay positive. The article explicitly says you don't need to be grateful, it's manageable, which feels almost taboo to say. We love a survivor story, don't we? We want the person to say, this illness was a gift.
And that toxic positivity is damaging. The NIH's Medline Plus resources on coping with chronic illness validate that anger and grief are ongoing responses. They aren't phases you pass through once and then you reach enlightenment. You cycle back. You might be fine for months, and then you have a flare-up, or you miss a best friend's wedding because you're unstable, and the grief hits you all over again.
It's not linear, it's circular.
It's spiral. Hopefully you're moving upward, learning more each time, but you still hit those same emotional coordinates, and that is okay. The article makes a beautiful point. This grief is real, and it deserves space. Just giving yourself permission to hate the situation is part of the healing.
I'm struck by the section on who are you becoming now? It reframes the loss as a transition. You mentioned earlier that the old you is gone. But is there a version of the new you that is actually better? Or is that falling into the trap of looking for a silver lining where there isn't one?
It's nuanced. I wouldn't say better because that implies the illness was worth it. Most people would give back the wisdom in a heartbeat to have their health back. But you do become different in ways that have value. You become more compassionate. When you've had to advocate for your own survival, you tend to be more understanding of others' hidden struggles. You stop judging people for being lazy because you know what bone-deep fatigue feels like. You develop a quieter form of resilience, as the article puts it. It's not the resilience of a tank crashing through walls, it's the resilience of water, finding a way around the obstacle.
That quieter resilience seems sustainable. The tank resilience, the pushing through, that's what breaks you eventually, even if you're healthy.
That is the irony, isn't it? The healthy way we live, high stress, low sleep, constant productivity, is actually biologically expensive for everyone. Adrenal insufficiency patients just get the bill immediately. The rest of us are paying on credit.
Wow, that is a sobering thought. They are the canaries in the coal mine for our burnout culture.
Before we wrap up, I want to address the listener who might be in the thick of this right now. Maybe they were diagnosed 6 months ago. They're still mourning the reliable one. They feel like they're failing because they can't do what they used to do. What is the takeaway for them?
The takeaway is that your worth was never actually about your output. That was a lie capitalism told you. Your worth is inherent. And the work you are doing now, the quiet, unseen work of managing a complex, life-altering condition, is incredibly hard work. It counts. You are not failing. You are navigating a physiological minefield every single day. That takes more courage than staying late at the office ever did.
And the grief? What do they do with that?
Carry it with care. Don't try to fix it. Don't let anyone tell you to get over it. It's a shadow that walks with you. Acknowledge it, respect it, and then take your meds and take your nap. That is the most productive thing you can do.
Eloise, thank you. This has been a necessary reframing of what it means to live with a chronic condition. And to you listening, if you know someone navigating a diagnosis like adrenal insufficiency, or if you're navigating it yourself, take a moment to acknowledge the magnitude of that shift. It's not just about the pills, it's about the person. If this conversation resonated with you, send it to a friend who needs to hear it. Sometimes validation is the best medicine we have.